Hi, this is Ryan from SpringvilleOnline.com, and I've made some reports on the Springville police and how they've neglected my grandmother's rights, that she paid for, you know, for years, for decades with her property taxes and other taxes. And, she was a citizen of Springville, owned a home there, paid property taxes, sales taxes, all the rest, and was a retired woman who worked for, 80% of her life, all the way up until she was 77 years old, taking care of people that were even younger than her as an LPN. She worked at the rest home on Main Street there in Springville for, just short of a decade. And, obviously she paid her income taxes and all the rest there. So when it comes down to her having a problem, with her property that she paid property taxes on for a decade, she can't file a complaint with the police, and neither can I on her behalf, because she has an expired ID. Her ID expired in 1996, and she recently went through the process with the perpetrator, her son, to get new ID and go through all that process, and then he took it and abandoned her, and took her money, sold her trailer without her signature, her home in Springville, didn't even have her authorization to sell it, didn't have power of attorney that I know of, and if he did, he coerced her into giving it, but she says that he didn't get it from her. She didn't give him any authority to do anything. So she got her bank account cleaned out all the way down to 47 cents, which was about $8,000 to $10,000. If we include all of her Social Security money and what she already had saved. And then he sold her home for well under the value. I mean, she had just bought it for 3 times the value less than a decade ago, and he sold it for $5,000 without her signature. And so we go to complain. I had to go pick her up because she was homeless, and he had abandoned her. He took her to his apartment and then abandoned her after all of her money was gone. And so I took her home with me to California. And I know she's 90 years old. We have 3 small kids, and it's hard for her, to really have the patience for that. She's ready to rest. She's not ready for, a bunch of kids all the time. And that's what we've got to offer. I mean, that's all I've got for her. But I tried to, file a police complaint, and the police, basically blew me off at first. And I complained and complained and complained and complained for several months. And finally, the chief wrote me and said, well, we're not going to deal with this anymore unless you have a notarized power of attorney authorization that you can work on her behalf. And I told him, hey, the guy took her ID. She has an expired identification, and the notary won't use expired identification in order to notarize it. And we have hurdles in getting her new ID because she has no ID, and she's from Canada. She's a naturalized citizen, but she's from Canada, so her birth certificate and everything else, is 90 years ago in Canada, and the documents needed to get a new ID are hard, if not nearly impossible to get, now that her ID is expired and that her son took everything to identify her away from her, except for this one piece of expired ID that she has. She needs a motorized cart, one of those mobility carts that she can get around. Her back has had surgery, and she's got all kinds of bone degeneration, and so it's hard for her to walk. It's also hard for her to lift her leg up high enough to get into the bathtub. And we only have a bathtub; we don't have a shower. So we need to remodel the shower for her so she can step in with one of those bathtubs that you can open the door and close the door. And so basically we're looking at between $10,000 and $15,000 worth of medical supplies so that she's able to get around and have a good quality of life. But they took all of her money. 4 days after taking every last dime she had, they abandoned her, and he went to New Mexico. And now I'm trying to work with the police, and the police are absolutely difficult to deal with. I have a confession from her son, verbally, and from her daughter-in-law, her son's wife, ex-wife, anyway, who was working in her behalf for her son. They're still friends, and so her son, my uncle, and his ex-wife were working on this, and I got a call from his ex-wife saying, hey, come get your grandma, she has no place to stay. and I had to go home. I had to go back to Utah and get her. And I have them recorded. I had my phone recording while my uncle's ex-wife and him both spoke on the phone. And, you know, he explained to her, hey, yeah, I did take all of her money and I'm going to pay it back and tell her I'm sorry. And then she passed the phone over to my grandma, and, you know, you can hear him, you know, talking. It's kind of hard to hear, but you can hear the conversation from my grandma's words and from my aunt's words that, yeah, hey, I'm sorry, I took your money, you know, is what he said. I'll pay you back. And he said that, and she actually confessed to that. The ex-wife said that while I was recording, and you can hear it in the audio recording. And then I got an email from him, and he says, well, I'm not going to give the money back, and if you ever bring her back to Utah, me and my sister are going to put her in the rest home. And, you know, after taking all of her money and her home and everything she owned in her home, even my stuff that was in the shed at her house, stuff that my wife's dad gave her, like an art easel and just collectible things and family heirlooms that were in my grandma's shed, my uncle took and just liquidated and probably threw most of it in the garbage. And so we try to file a police report with this, having a confession, having evidence from the bank saying that, yeah, it was him. We have pictures of him at the ATM, and it was him. You know, it matches, you know, and even the photos show him in it. And, you know, it was just days before he left and abandoned her. So he obviously didn't use it for her benefit whatsoever. He used it for his own benefit to move and, you know, go to another state. And we have witnesses, my cousin and others, that wrote the police and told them that they saw what was going on and they're witness to it. You know, so why is it the Springville police need an ID to take a police report? What if a person doesn't have any ID? Does that mean that they can't pursue a crime? I don't get that. You know, what if the person died? What if they weren't even around anymore to file a complaint? Does that mean the crime is absolved? Is it gone now because, you know, the person's gone, you know, passed away? I don't think so. I highly disagree with their position on this. I don't think the person needs ID to show that the crime was committed. We have forged checks that, you know, the signature doesn't match my grandma's signature on the checks. We have a bill of sale that doesn't have my grandma's signature on it. It only has my uncle's signature on it. We have witness testimony. We have the victim's testimony. You know, we have third-party testimony. We have my wife, myself, my cousin, my grandma, all testifying on video and emails directly to the police. We have all this evidence, right? And now my grandma's broke. She has medical needs and she can't pay for them. And, you know, my uncle has all of her money, or had it. He's probably spent it by now. And she received no benefits from all the money he took. And this is just recently. I mean, he's taken tens and twenties of thousands of dollars from when she sold her home, you know, 10, 15 years ago. You know, she sold it for $90,000. She didn't hardly buy anything herself. And he went through all that money, or a lot of it, himself. And, you know, borrowed money for his down payment on his house. You know, we've got all this testimony from my grandma on video. And he never paid her back and never did anything for her, you know. Just took it and ran every time. And, you know, called me and threatened me while I was trying to communicate with my grandma when he came and got her and took her to live with him. And cut off her phone. He shut her phone off that she'd had for about 10 years. She had a Cricket cell phone. He shut that off so nobody could call her. Didn't tell anybody where he lived so that I couldn't visit her. Couldn't do anything. I was totally helpless, and so was she. He had her all kinds of doped up on sleeping pills that he was taking himself from her prescription and then giving her these sleeping pills. And she doesn't take them now. She says she doesn't need them. She never has needed them. She's always got them from him. So what we have here is ID theft. We have check fraud. We have exploitation of an elderly adult. We have neglect and emotional abuse. We have, there's a couple others that I went through in the Utah statutes and defined for the police. And they're just like, well, you know, we don't care about the video. We don't care about the evidence. We don't care about the witness testimony. We don't care about any of that. We need your grandma to, you know, have a valid ID, have a notarized document, and to be able to use, you know, you in her behalf. She needs to have this all set up legally with valid ID. Well, I mean, part of the crime that was committed was that he took her ID. You know, how can she do any of that? So now her hands are tied because she was victimized and abused, and her, you know, all of her possessions, including her ID, was stolen, and now she can't do anything because he stole her ID? Well, that's part of the crime. These people are not serving the citizens of Springville. Springville police will only go after easy, victimless crimes like marijuana smokers or, you know, protesters. I've had that experience with them where they arrested me for using the streets without a permit, and just silly stuff. But when it comes to a real crime, when it requires real work, they won't even call the witnesses. They won't even investigate. They called the perpetrator and said, "Oh, okay, well, we figure it's okay now. So, you know, he was in the right, and you know, she's out of luck." And that was after only one phone call to one person, and that person was the perpetrator. So the Springville police are absolutely worthless. They're the most expensive department in Springville, Utah, and they have the worst prescription drug abuse in the nation. That's a fact. According to the March 18th, 2008 City Council meeting, it was testified by Pat Bird and Officer, what was it? Anyway, you can look it up on their website, their city meeting minutes, saying that, March 18th, 2008, look that up on their website, and I've got it also on springvilleonline.com. They say that they are 0.7% higher in prescription drug abuse than the county, Utah County, and the state, Utah State. And Utah State doubles the national average for prescription drug abuse and is number one for prescription drug abuse in the nation. So if Springville is 0.7% higher than the state averages and the county averages for prescription drug abuse, then that means Springville City has the worst prescription drug abuse rates of the entire nationwide, period. And that's probably worldwide too, because nobody in the world, no other country in the world, uses more prescription drugs than the United States. So Springville is probably, if my calculations are correct, the highest prescription drug abuse city in the entire worldwide. But they can focus on victimless crimes, and they can focus on other petty things and traffic stops and, pedestrian issues and just issues like that. But when it comes to a real crime committed in their city, they don't really care that much. If it takes too much work and it might cost them too much money, whatever. But they'll use all of their resources to persecute somebody for using the streets without a permit, like they did to me in 2010. So I say, they need an audit. The Springville Police Department, in fact, the Springville City Corporation needs to be audited, and they need to do some reviews on the Springville Police Chief, because I think he's an idiot. And I really think that Paul DeWitt, the prosecuting attorney, is a slacker. That's my opinion. So I'm going to put this publicly on YouTube, and they can complain about it all they want, but I'm going to go national with this. I'm going to make a newspaper. If they won't do anything to help my grandma, I will. You know what I'm saying? I'll print a newspaper. I'll get Gephardt if I can. I'll go national news. I'll do whatever it takes to show, that Springville needs an overhaul. Because my brother died in 2002 of a prescription overdose. So, Springville police and the community itself has let a lot of people down, and it let my brother down. It let my grandma down. It's let me down. And how many other people have they let down? I think that it's a crime. I think that it's a shame. I think that they're taking people's money and taxing them without representation. Taxation without representation is what we fought in this country for in the Revolutionary War, and I'm not going to put up with it. So that's my say.